Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Zombies on the Block, There Goes the Neighborhood, by Mike Evans, narrated by Tristan Morris. Chapter 1. Mike waited impatiently for the children's parents that lived on and near the block to show up or respond with more details. The praying hands he'd gotten from many of them only told Mike that at the time they were still alive. He tried his best to keep his cool. He tried taking some anti-diarrhea medicine, which only resulted in him puking his guts out again when he tried to keep the water down. He wished he could get some to stay down because he just about shit himself earlier as he was trying to survive John, the bus driver, and the strange lady in the van. Crapping himself was not something he had time for. The anti-diarrhea medicine had become his best friend after he'd had an unfortunate incident at the local Walmart earlier that week. If someone didn't know Mike, then saying he was an introvert was putting it nicely. He had realized while paying that there was no chance of him being able to make it home. Mike had let Emily and the kids know he had to hit the shitter, and when he went to the closest facility available, he'd been stopped at the door with a sign saying that it was being cleaned. Mike, being painfully shy, decided that in lieu of having to talk to someone, especially a stranger, that he would race time, aka his asshole, and had tried to race across the store, only to end up with one less pair of boxer briefs in his life. He had a newfound respect for the power of advantages related to having low shorts, not the type that showed off his ass, but the kind that did, thankfully, hang a good 4 inches lower than his boxers did. When Emily had asked him to hurry, he'd gotten to tell her he had shit his boxers and that it was going to be just a minute or two longer. He was sure that he'd been embarrassed in the past, but this definitely ranked highest on his most recent list. The number of dead, or dead on their feet, were starting to accrue. He watched out Jake's window, and thankfully, he saw that none of them walking were the parents of the kids downstairs. He wanted his own kids here, and wife, and outside of that, his list was pretty short, not counting family, of course. Not one of the parents had shown up yet, and the chatter from them had died after the first 10 minutes. Lily had been an absolute rock star, keeping them occupied with snacks and a cartoon on the television. They hadn't forgotten about what had happened, but having something to wiggle in front of them to keep their focus elsewhere had done nothing to hurt anything. Jake tapped his dad on the shoulder, making him jump a foot. He was so focused on the scene outside that it had sucked him in. Jake knew the unwritten Evans rule, which was quite simple. Don't ever wake an Evans male. Don't ever scare an Evans male, because their reactions were guaranteed to be one thing. Mike jumped, bringing up his fists. Jake immediately said, "Don't hit me, it's me. I'm not going to hit you. I was focused, and you scared me." Jake held up his bow. "You realize I've only got like 6 arrows, and I can't pull back your bow, so your arrows are useless to me? I mean, we are going to run out, and I doubt we can ask for a little help out the window and have one of the zombies toss them back up to us." "I know, Jake. I'm trying to figure out what we are doing here. I'm winging it as I go." Jake looked at his dad. He knew how shitty he'd felt the last week, and that if his dad looked this bad, he probably felt 100 times worse. He wasn't going to ever say how truly horrible he felt. "I didn't expect you to have a plan. I don't know why I'd expect a guy who writes zombie books and probably makes 6 zombie jokes a week would know what to do with himself. Don't think that just because the world is ending and I feel like shit that I won't put a size 11 right in your ass. You'd fall over. I could get back up. To get to the point, I need to check on the littles downstairs. Dad, it's like 2020, and you have me shooting sticks with a string. A fancy string, albeit. But seriously, what's the plan?" Mike was going to say something about it being a great bow, but realized what he was talking about, and hands down, he couldn't think of a valid reason he'd given him the instructions to shoot the bow. In his defense, There was nothing that made sense at the time, because everything was absolutely batshit crazy. He'd gone through 1,000,000 times in his head through his books, through conversations with other writers, with co-workers who never wanted to talk about it, and most importantly, he'd gotten more fan input than was probably healthy to receive at times. In every single one of his scenarios, the millions of ways he'd thought things would go, there had not been one single situation where he had been sick enough to debate that he might be happier dead if it would mean that the shits and puking had ended. Mike reached over to his son, taking the bow and tossing it onto the bed. He motioned with his head and went to the bedroom. Jake said, "And what are we doing? Did I just lose my zombie-watching job? I promise I can do better than this. You know I like the bow. It just seems a little silly when we—" Mike put up a finger, and Jake knew that shutting up was the answer. Mike said, "You didn't lose anything, and I appreciate the help, bud. I'm not always right, and at the time it felt like a great idea, only because I know you can drill those arrows like nobody else. Well, nobody else but me, given your good genetics and all." Jake looked at his dad, who was surely not at 100%, of course, and didn't want to bring anything up about how he looked and how that did little to make him feel better about his genetics. Jake just followed his dad, who reached behind his dresser and brought out a key ring with 2 keys hanging from it before Jake could see where he took it from. Jake knew his dad and guessed that he had more guns than anyone on the block. He unfortunately had mostly only practical guns, with the exception of one. Mike typed in the keypad numbers, and when the light went green, he twisted the key and the handle. Jake had seen it 1,000,000 times before, but at 12 years old he still smiled when he saw all that blued steel in front of him. He'd been learning over the last few years how to shoot, and had recently taken his hunter safety course, which only led to more shooting, which made him even happier. Before that, he'd still been his dad's hunting buddy since he was big enough to wear camo out in the field. The sarcastic side of Jake, part of that amazing genetics his dad had been preaching, whistled and said, "Hey, now we are looking at the 20th century, Dad. Which one do you want me to use?" Mike didn't hesitate for even a moment. He took a Browning lever-action .22 rifle from the gun's safe. It wasn't his. This one was Jake's, and he knew it. His grandpa Denny had given it to him for Christmas one year. Jake had loved that thing, even though it hadn't looked like a machine gun, like most or all his video games used. The first time he'd taken it out, he had fallen in love with it. Jake had put a few blocks of ammunition through it, and after firing over 1,000 rounds with it, he was more than proficient and was like a surgeon. Jake took out the wooden box that held his ammo for his gun. He slid the lid back and looked at a very full box. "You definitely have 1,000 rounds, and it wasn't empty when I bought 2 new bricks for you." Jake took the box, not expecting it to weigh 20 pounds, and it went right down to the floor. Both Evan's males jumped a foot back in the air, and the box emptied out its contents on the floor. It didn't take a genius to know what a 10-pound box was going to do if it landed on one of their feet or toes. It'd be an instant break. Mike refrained from yelling. He knew it was an accident. He saw a baseball hat on the floor and bent down and scooped up a few handfuls of bullets into the hat and handed it to the quite nervous-looking preteen. "So I got a lot of bullets, but, not to offend you, but is there a reason you were giving me the smallest caliber rifle in that safe?" "It'll kill them if you take your time shooting them. All you gotta do is shoot them in the Terrion," Jake asked before his dad could explain. "Okay, let's pretend that I don't have to do useless amounts of research on a daily basis for books and tell me what that means." Mike took an index finger and tapped Jake right in front of his ear and just above where his sideburns would be, had he had any. "Right there, smartass. Do you understand that?" "What year was I supposed to learn all this, Father?" "Little spot in front of the ear. Hit them. Your little bullets will go through their heads like a hot knife in butter, They'll fall down dead and they won't get back up. Then you keep doing it until the dumb fucks either all die for good or they all decide it is time to leave. I don't think that they think, though. If they do, I'd probably be dead by now, which I'm not, and I'm going to do my damnedest to keep it that way for everyone in the house. Load it up, shoot them down, rinse and repeat. Is that about right? Yeah, and make sure you wear your earplugs. It's just a 22. Right, and what does Grandpa Denny say every time you ask him a question? Huh? Exactly. Take care of your ears. You only get one set. I'd hate to think of a day those zombies are coming around a corner and you can't hear them and they eat your face partly off. Do you want to have your face torn off? No, not particularly. Of course, I don't want anything ripped off. Me either. We put too much money into those braces of yours to go uglifying yourself. Geez, I love you too, Dad, Jake said as he ran his tongue across his smooth teeth. He'd not missed his braces for even one day. He would take a retainer for 100 years over having that feeling the next day, waking up knowing that when he stretched his jaw and tried to eat, he would feel a pain that was always the same after an adjustment. Mike scooped up the rest of the bullets and motioned for Jake to get going. Mike got up to his feet, falling right back down. The spins took over, and he sat there for just a minute, resting against the hamper, looking at a collection of guns that would let him go anywhere in North America to hunt if he wanted to. He could pick any animal, probably short of a buffalo, and would have no issues putting it down. He got to a knee, feeling a sweat from his forehead, and ran through a list of what meds Emily had purchased for him that week. He wondered what exactly he could take to get a quick fix to get him through the day. Mike thought about bed, and how binging on Netflix and being on a high from some NyQuil Green original and going into a sleep of the dead would not suck at all. A scream from downstairs echoed its way up to him. Mike looked at the guns one more second. But when that scream grew into a symphony of them, he knew that it wasn't just one kid being dramatic. Not that he would blame any of them on a day like this if they were. He crawled across the floor, stumbling back down to a knee. Mike put a hand on the counter in the bathroom, getting up to his feet and stumbling forward. Mike landed on the bed. If he had been a foot shorter, he would have cracked his face on the wooden bed frame. It was solid and would hurt like a son of a bitch. More screams came, and Mike slapped himself across the face hard, which did little to help the spins. He jumped when the screams came again, followed by a volley of gunshots. Jake yelled, "I got two, Dad! Really shooting the shit out of them Terrions!" Lily, who didn't have an evil bone in her body, was doing her best to keep the kids from losing their minds. She'd had to listen to her dad and brother talk about zombies for the last 5 years, ever since her dad had decided to write a book, which she'd never read, and had no interest in reading. She could handle Zombieland because of the comedic value, but mostly because she was a snuggler, and her brother thought he needed to watch the movie at least once a week. She was going through the cupboard and collecting things she hoped the kids would like to eat. She knew from personal experience that a good Disney movie and a baggie full of hard pretzels could help to make someone feel good, even for a short time. Rylan came up behind her, pulling on her shirt. Rylan was a sweet kid, but the parents always said they felt like they were on suicide watch when he was around. Lily never knew what that meant, but his mom, Marcia, had kept a helmet on him any time he was outside. After so long, he had just gotten used to having it on, and the number of Band-Aids he needed, at least on his head, had improved tremendously. Lily wasn't paying attention to him. She was busy looking for the snacks. She always had pretzels, but ate her fair share of them and was trying to remember if she had polished off the bag. Her dad and Mom usually did weekend shopping for groceries, but with Dad being sick and Mom being crazy about disinfecting the house, it had not happened. Dad had tried to stay in the bedroom for as long as possible. The opera of sounds coming from their room over the last week had been extremely poor. Rylan said, "Hey, Lily, I think there's something wrong out here." Lily laughed. She didn't think of the irony when he said that, and it didn't take any work for the sarcasm to pour out, much like the rest of her family. She said, "Yeah, there's a lot of wrong going on outside, Rylan. I know that. I never thought John could move all that fast. He was running like crazy. I'm glad that they are out of there, though. That's the problem. Lisa from the townhomes passed out. She must not have had breakfast. My Grandpa Henry gets tired looking when he doesn't eat. Mom said he's got the diabetes." Lily still wasn't paying much attention to the boy. Her Grandpa Denny had type 2 diabetes, and she was used to seeing him check his sugars and doing injections. She said, "I'm getting her a snack, so hopefully she'll feel better." "Are you going to move her mouth for her?" Rylan asked. Lily really began to listen at that point. She questioned Rylan. "What are you talking about? She can chew her own food, so why would she need me to move her mouth for her? Quit being weird about it." Madison, the Buck's oldest daughter, who was the same age as Jake and Nora from down the streets, yelled, "Rylan, are you getting her water or not?" When Lily turned around, she saw that the reason she'd be making the chewing motions for her was because she was out for the count, flat on her back. She was African American and looked pale enough to pass for a white kid. Lily yelled, "Why didn't you start off saying that? What is wrong with her? What did you do to her?" "How should I know? She looked kind of tired. A few seconds later, she fell down off of the couch onto the floor." Lily had heard the thud, but she just thought it was Rylan or one of the Jakes or Josh jumping around and off the couch. Lily forgot about the snacks and went straight to Madison, who was kneeling next to her. They'd propped her head up with a pillow, but it wasn't going to be enough to do anything to save her. When Lily put a hand on her arm, she pulled it away. It was hot as fire. Madison said, "My mom's a nurse, and we need her to come and take a look at her." Her younger sister Alana said, "Madison, everyone knows Mom is a nurse, and so is Mackenzie. Mom's at work, so what do you think she's going to be able to do for Lisa while she's at work? Why don't you get my phone out of my bag and call her then and quit being dumb?" Madison yelled, getting frustrated at just about everything that was happening. "I'm not being dumb, but if she's at work, what are you planning on her doing? You know that she's busy. She won't even answer the phone." "Then call Dad. God, why do you have to be so annoying? Dad's at Camp Dodge working. What do you expect him to do? He's a diesel mechanic, so he probably can't do much other than CPR or plugging a gun wound." Their dad, Michael, was just over 40 and almost ready to retire from the Army. He'd been in since he was in his early 20s and was inching closer by the day to his 20-year retirement mark. His wife, Elisa, was smart with their money, and they did what was necessary to have no debt by the time he retired. It could be odd being around the couple at times, mostly because if you talked about a television show that was on one of the paid networks, she'd try and say something kind of like, "Oh, we don't watch that show." Sean, who did not put any sugar coating on anything, would plain as day say, "We don't watch it because my wife's a cheap Jew and won't pay for any cable. I have to go to a friend's house when I want to watch the Hawkeyes play football when they aren't on one of the normal channels." "Don't you think he'd like to know about the zombies on the block and that we aren't going to school today?" Madison asked. Lily was trying to watch Lisa, but the bickering between the two sisters made her think it might have been easier having a brother. She thought both sisters were awesome, but they were distracting her from something pretty important. She was going to yell at her dad to come down, but Lisa's eyes opened, followed by her mouth. Purple. Lisa reached up with both hands out of nowhere. Lillian tried to back up and away, but Lisa got her by the shirt and pulled Lily towards herself as Lisa brought herself closer. Lillian screamed at the top of her lungs. The other two girls did what any sane person would do and backed the fuck up. Lily looked astonished for a moment at the two of them and knew that when it hit the fan that you got out of the way. She couldn't necessarily blame them, but at the same time, the idea of reaching out and giving either of them a hug was not something she wanted to do. Lily fell backwards and twisted to the side. Lisa fell to the floor, and Lily took flight over fight temporarily. Lisa was dead set on Lily being her first meal and chased the girl around the kitchen. The kids raced to the back of the room, watching a frantic Lily trying her best to stay alive in a deadly game of tag. The floor wasn't huge. The living room ran into the dining area, with the cooking area connected. She slid head first beneath the kitchen table, across the wood floor, and stopped just shy of the wall. Lisa had no clue what to do, and ran straight into the table and fell back to the ground. Lily was pushing up to a knee and ran forward. Lisa growled, screaming in rage, and raced after Lily, who had disappeared into the kitchen. Purple Lisa raced after her but jumped onto the table and over the separator between the sink and the kitchen. Lily grabbed a 16-inch skillet and assumed a baseball stance. She hadn't expected her to be where she showed up. Lisa dove straight for her, looking like a professional wrestler doing a high-flying dive off from the top ropes. Lily pushed herself back until she hit the cupboards behind her. She closed her eyes, putting the pan up to block her. Lily hit the knob of the drawer and thought it couldn't hurt. She pulled it open until it was out as far as it could extend. Lily wished she had some cool kind of house where a bunch of knives or poisonous darts would spring out and shoot up and put Purple Lisa out of her misery, or keep her from bestowing it upon others. Unfortunately, this drawer held only a bunch of different-sized Ziploc bags. Lisa crashed face first into the drawer, her body going limp for only a moment. Lily crawled out from under the drawer, Lisa's body laid out at the moment. She crawled back out into the living room. All of the kids were glued to her and what was happening. When she raced into the living room, Rylan screamed, "No, don't come in here! She's going to follow you and she's going to eat us! Don't let her eat us!" Lily turned around just in time to try and stop Lisa when she heard the drawer slam shut and her footsteps from behind her. Lily held up her hands and braced herself for the hit. She tried to use some of the taekwondo she'd learned over the years, but it was not very useful, and this girl was not about to do fight fair. Her dog Harley came up behind her, meaning to be her savior, but failed miserably. Lily had her hands up in defense against Lisa, but when Harley got in the way, she tumbled backward and fell flat and hard. It took everything in her being able to get back up. Chapter 2. Denny didn't wait even a moment when he went around the corner. He brought up his rifle and aimed the .44 caliber lever action straight away. He never hesitated and had his finger on the trigger before he had it up to his eye. There was no waiting at this point. It was kill or die. He aimed, shooting off 4 rounds in a row. Diane screamed, watching her husband shoot the infected. She tried not to think of her house and what it was going to look like post-zombie apocalypse, assuming she survived. Her house was so full of things that were breakable. She was sure there was nothing good happening up there. The sound rushed through her senses, making her choke on a scream. Diane pulled out her pistol, flipping off the safety and holding it ready to shoot if someone made it around the corner past Denny. Denny aimed true. He'd been the one who had taught all of his kids how to shoot. Mike had been the only one who had continued on and instilled that into his own kids as well. 3 of the zombies walked across his vision at the top of the steps. When they saw Denny, the first one took a step forward, not looking down, and not seeming to understand the theory of gravity anymore. He fell forward, bouncing off the stairs and walls, and rolled down the steps. The other 2 watched it, and they didn't do much better than the first. They gripped onto the railing as they began to fall as well. Denny took a step backwards when the first of the 3 landed at the bottom of the steps. He fired point blank, obliterating its skull. The warm white walls, which had been painted less than a year ago, after they'd gone with the townhome, now looked like a scene straight from Dexter. He watched it for a second, making sure it stayed down. This was all too new to know what to do with these things, but everything in his soul told him to shoot these things in the skull. Denny only opened the lever halfway before pushing it back up and into place. He clicked the trigger to fire, but nothing happened. He looked down to the ejector, but the other two came fast, mostly because when they heard the shots, they'd let go and rolled down the stairs, bouncing off of each other. He pulled his .44 from its holster and fired off 2 shots. The revolver was guaranteed to work, to never malfunction, and to send a round at 36,000 psi straight into each of their skulls. The .44 made the rifle look like he had been kind to the first one. Denny watched for another second, making sure they didn't move. When the two of them both stayed still, Denny turned all focus onto the last of the dead. At least the last of the dead that were in the home, that he knew of, as it tripped over one of its dead fallen brethren. Denny fired off a second round from the revolver and watched a new hole get created in the stairs above it. When the dead tripped, it fell forward and Denny's shot missed by a foot. It landed next to his foot, and Denny backed up, not tripping, but trying to put all the distance that he could between its mouth and his leg. He tried to keep his balance, but lost it, falling back into the drywall. His 200-plus pounds went clean through the wall, and he was almost sitting in there. When he tried to get up, he didn't realize that his belt had gotten stuck on something inside of the wall. He also realized very quickly he'd just thrown his back out, something he did regularly, and always said he had to go to a bone cracker when he needed to get it fixed up. Denny looked at his hands, but was terrified when he saw that they had never been so empty when he needed a gun the most. He didn't worry about himself for even 1 second. He'd lived a long life for an Evans male. His dad and his grandpa and great-grandpa had lived to their 40s and 50s, and at 70-plus he knew he was setting records every day. Mike always told him he was his biggest fan, and that it wouldn't hurt his feelings if he hit 80 or 90. Of course, nothing would make him happier if he could see his final 2 grandkids graduate college and get married. Denny watched as the last of the trio tried to get back to its feet. It tripped over one of the dead and started crawling forward. Denny tried bringing up his foot to kick at it, but the strain racing through his back made him feel like someone was running a jagged, rusty knife down the middle of his spine. People who had never injured their back before had no sense of what kind of pain they could handle or feel, as the human body was completely connected and was hard to understand without having to deal with it. Denny kicked at it as it inched itself closer. Its blackened purple tongue hung out of its mouth, looking more like a panting dog in the summer. A panting dog hell-bent on ripping the flesh from Denny just as soon as it could. He fought through the pain, bringing up his leg, because it was fight or flight, and being stuck at the moment left fight as the only option. Denny brought his loafer down into its face once, twice, 3 times. He thought if he was still turning wrenches for a living that he'd have the accompaniment of being able to use a steel-toed work boot. However, he wasn't, and he didn't have that. The soft, flexible leather top and orthopedic sole did nothing to stop the zombie from making its way closer to him. This was all taking seconds, but each second ticking away felt like 1,000,000 years had passed all at once. When he tried to bring his foot down one more time, it clenched onto the back and the side of his ankle. Denny kicked wildly at it, ignoring the lightning sprinting through his back. It didn't matter, because with the grip this purple-skinned, blackened-tongue, flesh-eating piece of shit had on him, he knew that there was no way in which the continuing chain of events ended pleasantly.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?